December 1945, Germany. A military Cadillac, a mysterious truck, and a crash that would change the world. Inside that car was America's most feared general, the man who destroyed Hitler's army in 6 weeks, the man who predicted that Russia was our real enemy, George S. Patton. The driver walked away without a scratch. Patton's dog was unharmed, but Patton himself paralyzed. 12 days later, he was dead. The official report called it a tragic accident, but recently declassified documents tell a very different story. Soviet intelligence wanted Patton dead. The American OSS, which later became the CIA, had agents who confessed that they received orders to silence him. Why? Because Patton had a little black book, and he was about to return to America and tell the world a truth that remains hidden to this day. In this video, we will uncover the secret war that never happened, the plan they called Operation Unthinkable, and the truth that may have cost a general his life. May 8th, 1945. Victory in Europe Day. Paris is dancing in the streets. London is popping champagne. New York is throwing a ticker tape parade. 6 years of bloodshed finally over. Hitler is dead. Nazi Germany has fallen. The world is celebrating. But there is one place where no one is celebrating. Headquarters of the United States Third Army, Bavaria, Germany. Here, a general stands alone at a window. His back is turned to the celebration. He is staring east, toward Russia. His officers say he is pacing like a caged lion, restless, angry, almost afraid. This is General George S. Patton, and when his aide asks him why he is not celebrating, Patton turns slowly. There is no joy in his eyes, only a cold, terrifying clarity. And he speaks the words that would echo through history forever. We have defeated the wrong enemy. Just days earlier, Patton had attended a joint victory parade in Berlin. American, British, and Soviet troops marching side by side. For the politicians, this was a symbol of Allied unity. For Patton, it was a nightmare. He watched the Soviet troops march past. He saw their massive Joseph Stalin tanks, far more powerful than our Shermans. He saw the brutality in the eyes of the Soviet commissars, the same look he had only seen before in the Nazi SS. And most disturbing of all, he saw what Soviet soldiers were doing to German civilians. Patton understood immediately. This was not liberation. This was a new occupation. Stalin had not freed Eastern Europe. He had conquered it. Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Romania, Bulgaria. These nations were no longer free countries. They were Stalin's new colonies. Now, to understand what happened next, you must understand Patton's mind. Patton was not merely a warrior. He was an obsessive student of military history. He believed he had lived past lives as a soldier, in the Roman legions, in Napoleon's Grande Armée, and history had taught him one immutable lesson. Empires do not share power. They compete for it until one destroys the other. In May of 1945, Patton made a calculation. Cold, mathematical, purely military. Fact 1. The United States Army in Europe was at the absolute peak of its power. Battle-hardened soldiers, the finest equipment on Earth, complete air superiority. Fact 2. The Soviet Army was exhausted, overextended across half a continent, and most critically, entirely dependent on American supplies. American trucks, American food, American fuel. Fact 3. America's atomic bomb was nearly ready. Fact 4. Every single day that passed, American soldiers were shipping home. Demobilization had already begun. Patton ran the numbers. If we strike now, while Soviet forces are disorganized, while our strength is at its peak, we can push them back to their own borders in 6 weeks. If we wait, the Cold War will last 50 years. That 50-year prediction? It was almost exactly right. The Cold War lasted from 1947 to 1991, 44 years. Patton was off by less than 6 years. October 1945. Patton attended a meeting with the Undersecretary of War, Robert Patterson. It should have been a routine meeting. Occupation policies, administrative matters, the usual bureaucratic tedium. But Patton was Patton. He could never hold his tongue. And he said what no American general had ever dared to say publicly. Mr. Secretary, we need to keep our boots on and our guns loaded. We need to tell the Russians exactly where their border is, and if they don't like it, we should push them all the way back to Moscow. Patterson's face went white. General, do you understand that would mean World War III? Patton, with that magnificent arrogance that made him both loved and hated, replied, Sir, World War III is inevitable. The only question is whether we fight it now, when we hold every advantage, or we fight it in 10 years, when they have the atomic bomb and have enslaved half of Europe, building controversy. But Patton's plan went even further, into territory that would horrify the Allied leadership. Patton did not merely want to attack Russia. He had a secret proposal that was morally repugnant to Washington. But militarily, it was brilliant. Patton wanted to rearm the Germans. Yes, the very same Germans we had just finished fighting. Secretly, Patton had already given orders to his officers. Certain German panzer divisions that had surrendered to the Third Army were not to be dissolved. Their officers were to be kept in custody. Their equipment was to be maintained and battle-ready. Patton's reasoning was coldly practical. The Wehrmacht was the only army on Earth that truly knew how to fight the Russians. They had done nothing else for 4 years. On the Eastern Front, brutal, bloody, hard-won experience. Patton said privately, "Give me my men. Give me the German divisions I have in custody. We will rearm them. We will march them at my side. We will finish the job that Hitler botched. But we will do it for democracy." When these rumors reached Eisenhower, a friendship that had lasted decades ended forever. You must understand, Eisenhower and Patton had been close friends for many years. They had known each other since West Point. Decades of mutual respect. But in 1945, Eisenhower was playing a different game entirely. Eisenhower wanted to be president. He had political ambitions. He wanted to be remembered as Ike the peacemaker, not as Ike the man who started World War III. And his most famous general was publicly demanding war with Russia and proposing to rearm the Nazis? It was political suicide. Eisenhower ordered Patton to denazify Bavaria immediately. Remove all former Nazis from government positions, no exceptions. Patton complied, deliberately, slowly. His reasoning was practical to a fault. A Nazi bureaucrat who knew how to run the sewage system was more useful than an inexperienced Democratic appointee who did not. Pragmatic? Certainly. Politically acceptable? Absolutely not. And then Patton made the statement that would destroy his career. At a press conference, when a reporter asked about Nazi Party membership, Patton said casually, "This Nazi thing, it's just like being a Democrat or Republican back home." This was 1945. The Holocaust had just been discovered. Photographs of concentration camps were appearing in every newspaper in America. And the nation's most famous general was saying Nazi Party membership was no big deal? The press destroyed him. Now, here is the most shocking revelation in this entire story. Patton was not a crazy warmonger, and he was not alone. While Eisenhower was desperately trying to maintain peace, in London, Prime Minister Winston Churchill had given his military chiefs a top-secret order: design a plan for a preemptive attack on the Soviet Union. The code name? Operation Unthinkable. The name itself tells you what even the planners thought of it. This plan remained classified until 1998, more than 50 years. When it was finally declassified, historians were stunned. Churchill, the great statesman, had been planning World War III? Let me share the details of Operation Unthinkable. Target date, July 1st, 1945. Yes, barely 2 months after Germany's surrender. Forces required: 47 British and American divisions and 10 rearmed German divisions. Exactly what Patton had proposed. Attack zone: the Dresden area of Germany. Objective: force Stalin to release Poland and permit free elections throughout Eastern Europe. Churchill's logic was identical to Patton's. Britain was bankrupt. Her empire was crumbling. If the Soviet army remained in Central Europe, Western freedom would be permanently threatened. And who was supposed to lead this attack? George S. Patton. He was the only general in the world with both the audacity and the experience in rapid armored warfare capable of defeating a numerically superior Soviet force. Patton would have commanded the spearhead of Operation Unthinkable. But the plan was rejected. The British generals, led by Field Marshal Alan Brooke, delivered their assessment to Churchill. "We face Russian forces superior in number by 3-1 on the ground. If we attack, we will find ourselves in a total war that we cannot win, without the complete and unwavering support of the United States." And there was the problem. America did not want another war. President Truman wanted the Russians to help defeat Japan in the Pacific. He had no desire to fight them in Europe. Eisenhower, following his political orders, rejected any suggestion of confrontation. Patton was left completely alone. His strategic vision, which matched that of the British Prime Minister himself, was dismissed as the fantasy of a warmonger who could not live without battle. Patton wrote in his diary, "We are dismantling the greatest army that has ever existed, while the barbarians stand at the gates, sharpening their swords." Every day, his desperation grew. He felt like a man screaming warnings in a soundproof room. October 1945. Eisenhower, exhausted by the scandals and the headlines, finally relieved Patton of command. The Third Army, Patton's legendary force that had rampaged across Europe, was taken from him. He was given the 15th Army, a paper army whose only mission was to compile the official history of the war. A warrior sentenced to a desk. Imagine it. This was the man who had personally led from the front to defeat the Nazis. The man whose tank crews called him Old Blood and Guts. The man for whom soldiers would gladly give their lives. And now his job was filing papers. For a man like George Patton, this was a fate worse than death. But Patton did not surrender. Even in exile, he remained dangerous. They had humiliated him with a transfer, but they had not silenced him. He began telling close friends that he would resign his military commission, return to America, and then, I am going to blow the lid off this whole rotten mess. He was planning a national speaking tour, city after city, audience after audience. He would tell the American people exactly how their leaders had sold Europe to communism through sheer political cowardice. And he had evidence. Patton told a friend, "I have a little black book, and when I get home, I'm going to make this whole thing explode." What was in that notebook? The names of incompetent Allied commanders, the political deals that had been made with Stalin, the decisions that had condemned millions of Eastern Europeans to Soviet slavery. Patton was scheduled to fly home to America on December 10th. On December 9th, he decided to take one last hunting trip. December 9th, 1945. A road near Mannheim, Germany. Clear day, dry pavement, almost no traffic. Patton was riding in his official Cadillac. The driver was Private First Class Horace Woodring. In the front passenger seat sat Patton's Chief of Staff, Major General Hobart Gay. Patton's hunting dog was also in the car. Suddenly, a U.S. Army 2.5-ton truck approaching from the opposite direction turned left, directly into the path of Patton's Cadillac. The vehicles collided. Impact speed? No more than 30 to 40 kilometers per hour. It should have been a minor fender bender, nothing more. The driver, Woodring, completely uninjured. General Gay, completely uninjured. Patton's dog, completely uninjured. General George S. Patton, his head struck the glass partition behind the front seat. His neck was fractured. He was paralyzed from the neck down. Patton was rushed to the military hospital in Heidelberg. And here, the story enters very dark territory. Question 1. The truck driver was Technical Sergeant Robert L. Thompson. 2 other soldiers were riding with him in the truck. 3 witnesses. There was no serious criminal investigation, no court-martial. Thompson and his companions quickly disappeared from military records. Why? Question 2. There was no forensic examination of the crash site. A United States Army general, the most famous soldier in America, nearly killed in a collision and no proper investigation? Question 3. Patton survived the crash. He was paralyzed, but his heart was strong. Doctors believed recovery was possible. Then suddenly, 12 days later, he was dead. The official cause of death? Pulmonary embolism, a blood clot. Remarkably convenient timing. Decades later, a man came forward. His name was Douglas Bazata. He was a decorated OSS operative, America's wartime intelligence agency, which later became the CIA. In 1979, Bazata made a shocking claim, publicly, on the record. I was ordered to kill General Patton. According to Bazata, the OSS gave him direct orders to silence Patton. Bazata claimed the crash was deliberately staged, and when the crash failed to kill Patton, he was helped to die in the hospital. Now, Bazata's testimony remains controversial. Some historians believe him, others do not. But one thing is beyond dispute. Patton's death benefited a great many powerful people. Stalin. Patton was the only Allied general capable of defeating the Red Army in 1945. With Patton dead, Soviet domination of Eastern Europe was secure. Eisenhower. His political ambitions could proceed without his most troublesome subordinate making embarrassing headlines. Washington politicians. They could pursue their policy of accommodation with Stalin without a decorated war hero contradicting them on every radio program in America. December 21st, 1945. Patton's condition suddenly deteriorated. A blood clot reached his lungs. His wife, Beatrice, was at his bedside. His last words were, "It is very dark. It is getting late." George Smith Patton, Jr. was 60 years old. He was buried in Ham, Luxembourg, beneath a simple white cross, among his soldiers, exactly as he had requested. There was no ticker tape parade in New York. The national speaking tour never happened. The little black book was never found. The prophet had been silenced. After Patton's death, there was relief in both Washington and Moscow. The warmonger was gone. Peace was secured. Demobilization could continue. But history has a dark sense of humor. March 1946, just 3 months after Patton's death, Winston Churchill traveled to America, to Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri. President Truman stood beside him on the stage, and Churchill spoke the very words that Patton had been trying to say when he died. From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Suddenly, the entire Western world awoke from its slumber. Stalin was not an ally. Stalin was the new Hitler. The Cold War had officially begun, exactly as Patton had predicted. Now listen carefully to history's cruelest ironies. 1945, Patton was destroyed for suggesting we rearm the German army. 1950, just 5 years later, America officially began rearming West Germany to defend against the Soviet threat. Exactly what Patton had proposed, 5 years too late, from a far weaker position. 1945, Patton was called a warmonger for suggesting a military alliance like NATO. 1949, NATO was founded. American troops were stationed in Germany. They remain there to this very day. 1945, Patton predicted the Soviet Union would collapse within 50 years if the West stood firm. 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. 46 years later. Patton was off by only 4 years. If they had listened to Patton in 1945, if Operation Unthinkable had been launched, or if merely the threat of it had been used, when America's position was strongest, the Berlin Wall would never have been built. In 1956, Soviet tanks would not have crushed Hungarian civilians in the streets of Budapest. In 1968, there would have been no Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia. Millions of Eastern Europeans would not have suffered 50 years of Soviet dictatorship. This is not mere speculation. It is simple mathematics. Patton correctly calculated that in 1945, Western military superiority was absolute. Every day that passed, that advantage diminished. George Patton was not a perfect man. He was arrogant, he was crude, he was politically incorrect in ways that would be unacceptable today. He slapped a shell-shocked soldier, a genuinely wrong thing to do. He made insensitive statements repeatedly, but none of that invalidates his strategic clarity. Patton possessed the rarest gift in any leader, whether military or political. He saw the world as it truly was, not as politicians wished it to be. Eisenhower was a diplomat, a politician. He knew how to compromise. Patton was a prophet. Prophets do not compromise. And prophets are usually destroyed by the very people they are trying to save. Today, 80 years later, Patton's grave lies in Luxembourg, a simple white cross, surrounded by his soldiers. He rests exactly where he wished to be, but his ghost still walks the corridors of the Pentagon. Every time a general tells a politician an uncomfortable truth, Patton is there. Every time a leader sacrifices long-term security for short-term peace, Patton's warning echoes. Every time history vindicates a so-called warmonger, Patton smiles. Patton once wrote, "Lead me, follow me, or get out of my way." In 1945, the world chose the third option. They pushed him aside, and 50 years of Cold War was the price. History records that George Patton was a great warrior. The truth is that he was a prophet, and the tragedy of prophets is that they must die before they are proven right. If you found value in this story, please subscribe and ring the notification bell. In our next video, we will examine the secret nuclear